My parents lived through me, always praising my brother, Chase, then they asked me to leave, so I took the house. Let them live with that. As the younger sibling, it was obvious that my older brother was the golden child. If you looked up golden child in the dictionary, you'd probably find a picture of Chase. He was always their favorite and my mom made no attempt to hide it. My mother fit the stereotype of a parent whose world revolved around her son. From the moment he was born, he was practically royalty. Every achievement of his, no matter how trivial, was met with wild celebration. I felt like I could have cured cancer and they'd just say, "That's nice, honey." But if Chase brought home a B+ in history, a hero's welcome. Growing up, everything was all about Chase. He always got the best things, first choice of everything, and sharing wasn't in his vocabulary. I remember being maybe 5, practically begging to watch The Little Mermaid, but Chase insisted on Jurassic Park. Guess which movie we watched? My mom's explanation was always, "He's older, sweetie." That pretty much summed up my childhood. When Chase left for college, I briefly thought I might finally get a little attention. But no, my mom acted as if the world was ending. She was inconsolable, constantly sighing about how much she missed her baby and how eerily quiet the house felt without him. I was still living there, mind you, but apparently I was invisible. She'd call him several times a day, email him, and send him care packages every week. I don't think I ever received a single care package in my life, but apparently Chase needed one every 7 days. After Chase graduated, he got engaged to Harper, who he'd been with for years. She's a genuinely sweet person, and I like her. But that engagement unleashed a whole new level of madness in my mom. She behaved like it was her own wedding, obsessing over the venue, meticulously choosing decorations, and even buying a dress that looked alarmingly bridal. Harper handled it gracefully, but I could tell she was less than thrilled with my mom's constant attempts to steal the spotlight. After they married, Chase and Harper settled in Austin. That's a good distance from us here in North Carolina. I foolishly hoped that maybe my mom would finally focus on her own life instead of obsessing over Chase. But no, instead she started fantasizing about them moving back. My mom has this elaborate daydream of a big multi-generational household where we all live together and she gets to play grandma to a gaggle of grandchildren. She conveniently ignores the fact that Chase and Harper aren't even trying for kids yet. During all of this, I stayed local for college. It made financial sense, and I thought it would be helpful to my parents since they were getting older. After graduating, I got a pretty good job in town and decided to continue living at home. It was practical. My work was only a 15-minute drive, and I figured I could save some money while helping out. Besides, my parents had often mentioned that they intended to leave the house to me eventually. My mom used to say, "One day, this will all be yours and your dad, and I will move to Texas to be closer to Chase and Harper's kids." Of course, that was before it was obvious there wouldn't be any grandkids anytime soon. For the past several years, I've been carrying the financial burden. My parents retired early, and while they have some savings, it's not enough to cover everything. So, I've been the one paying the bills, buying the groceries, and generally keeping the household afloat. It hasn't been easy, but I didn't mind too much. I thought I was doing the right thing by supporting my family. It wasn't like Chase was contributing. He rarely even visits. The last time I saw him was at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. And even then he spent most of the time complaining about his life in Texas. You'd think my parents would at least appreciate the fact that I've been holding everything together all this time. But no, instead, my mom spends most of her time talking about how much she misses Chase and how she wishes he'd move back home. It's draining. Every time we sit down to eat, it's the same question: do you think Chase and Harper will ever move back? Wouldn't it be lovely if they were here? Mom says, a wistful look in her eyes. She even entertains the notion of transforming a spare room into a nursery for future grandkids. Never mind the fact that the spare room she speaks of vanished years ago when Chase moved to Texas and his old bedroom became her home office. Oh, that office. Dad, in a grand gesture, remodeled Chase's room after he left, creating this haven for her hobbies. A custom desk, built-in shelves overflowing with scrapbooking supplies, stationery. She adores that room. For a while, it seemed like she was finally letting go of this obsession with Chase. Then Thanksgiving happened. Chase, with the innocent cruelty of a thoughtless son, mentioned how strange it felt to not have his old room. That was it. Mom seized upon that remark, spending the next month badgering Dad to revert the office back into a bedroom just in case Chase ever returned. He thankfully resisted. Things have been relatively peaceful until recently. A shift has occurred. Mom's been acting odd. She's been dropping these vague hints about impending transformations, casually asking questions like, "Have you ever considered living independently?" Or the other night, she suggested it might be an opportune moment for me to seek my own place, maybe even consider marriage. Initially, I assumed she was simply being encouraging, but now I'm not so sure. Her hints intensified, moving from subtle suggestions to blatant prodding. She'd ask, "Do you ever feel like you're missing out on something? Or wouldn't decorating your own apartment be fun?" I dismissed it initially until she began leaving apartment rental listings on the kitchen counter. Printouts, circled addresses, and notes in her handwriting, great location, close to work. It was bizarre, but I hesitated to confront her. I think part of me didn't want to believe she was actively trying to evict me. But then Dad started chiming in, and that's when the penny dropped. Dad, usually the silent observer, the one who actively avoids family drama, suddenly started spouting things like, "You're not a child anymore. Don't you crave your own space? Or you can't live with your parents forever. You need to either get married or move out." I'm 27, so yes, living at home might not be ideal, but it's been a practical arrangement. It's not like I'm a burden. I've been covering the household expenses, allowing them to enjoy their early retirement. So why the sudden push? Then, one night at dinner, it all became excruciatingly clear. Mom casually announced, "You know, Chase and Harper are contemplating moving back to North Carolina. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have the entire family together again?" She delivered this with a radiant smile, as if it were the most brilliant idea imaginable. I tried to remain neutral, wanting to see where this was heading. And predictably, she elaborated. "It's just that we don't have much space here anymore," she said, her gaze lingering on me, subtly implying I was the obstacle. "If they moved back, we'd have to make some adjustments. We could even turn your room into a nursery someday." I sat there, stunned, trying to process this. My room, the one I've been financially supporting to keep a roof over my head, repurposed into a future nursery for Chase's hypothetical children. It felt like a betrayal, but I remained silent. Dad added, "It's something to consider. You're thriving at work. You could easily afford a nice place of your own." The frustration was simmering, but I suppressed it. I wanted to hear the full extent of their plan before reacting. Over the ensuing days, the hints became more pointed. Mom brought up the idea of converting the home office back into a bedroom just in case Chase and Harper needed it. She even started gushing about how thrilling it would be to have a full house again, as if I were invisible, already gone. It was clear this wasn't a fleeting fantasy. They were dead serious about Chase and Harper moving in. What really cut deep was how little consideration they gave to my position in all of this. I've been their financial backbone for years. It's my income that keeps the roof over our heads, the lights on, and food on the table. Chase hasn't contributed a single cent since he took off for Texas. And now, at the mere possibility of his return, they're prepared to usher me out like I'm some unwanted guest who's outstayed her welcome. It's not just about the money either, though that's a huge part of it. It's also the way they practically worship Chase as if he's some kind of returning hero. Mom never stops going on about how difficult it must be for him being so far away. "He's always been such a family person," she said the other day, as if he didn't deliberately move halfway across the country and then barely bother to call. Meanwhile, I'm here day in and day out busting my butt to help them, and it's like it counts for nothing. What really stung was when I accidentally overheard Mom on the phone with one of her friends. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but she was practically shouting. She was gushing about how wonderful it would be if Chase came back and how excited she was to have Harper around to help with the cooking. My name never came up, not once, not my contributions, nothing. It was like I simply didn't exist in her vision of their perfect future. The following day, Mom sat me down for a talk she called a family discussion. Dad was there too, but as always, he mostly stayed silent and let her do all the talking. She started off by saying how proud they were of me and how grateful they were for everything I've done. It sounded good at first, but then she smoothly transitioned to the real subject, Chase and Harper. "We've been talking about how to make this house work for everyone," she said. "And we think it might be time for you to spread your wings." I asked her what she meant, though I already knew perfectly well. "Well," she continued, "with Chase and Harper potentially coming back, things will be a little cramped. We feel it would be a good opportunity for you to find your own place and begin your journey towards living independently." She presented it as some sort of grand gift they were bestowing upon me, as if essentially pushing me out of the house I've been financially supporting was doing me a favor. I tried to stay composed and asked what their plan was regarding the bills. Mom smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, we were hoping you could continue to contribute for a little while, just until Chase and Harper get settled in." Of course. They wanted me to move out and still pay the bills so Chase and Harper could live here rent-free. I'm not even sure if Chase has definitively decided to move back yet, but they've already put out the welcome mat. At this point, I was struggling to contain my anger. I asked why Chase couldn't just get a place nearby if he was so determined to return. Mom sighed and said, "It's not that simple, sweetie. They're going through a lot right now and they need family support. You wouldn't understand, you've always been so independent." She said it like it was a negative trait, as if my independence was some kind of flaw. The conversation ended with Mom asking me to think about it and let them know my decision. I didn't say much. I was too furious to trust myself to speak without exploding. Afterward, I retreated to my room and began pacing, desperately trying to figure out what to do. I don't think I've ever felt so hurt and unappreciated in my entire life. It's as if everything I've ever done for them means absolutely nothing compared to the chance to have Chase back under their roof. Ever since that conversation, I've been oscillating between feeling deeply hurt and absolutely furious. It's been impossible to concentrate on anything else. Every time I glance around the house, all I can think about is how much of it I'm responsible for keeping afloat. The fridge is full because of me. The electricity stays on because of me. The Wi-Fi they use to binge-watch their shows all day? Me. But apparently none of it matters because their precious golden child might be coming back. The next week was incredibly awkward at home. My parents were clearly waiting for my answer, but I wasn't ready to give them one. They kept pretending like everything was normal, which made it even worse. Mom would hum while making dinner, asking me how work was, as if she hadn't just asked me to completely uproot my life for Chase. My dad's avoidance was nothing new. It was his default setting when the atmosphere thickened. Meanwhile, a quiet determination settled over me as I began planning my escape. I needed to weigh my options carefully. The truth was, I couldn't endure life in that house any longer, not when I was treated as an afterthought. Staying wouldn't magically change anything, it would just prolong the inevitable discomfort. So, I started the apartment hunt. It was a frustrating process. Everything within a reasonable distance of my job seemed either ridiculously overpriced or came with reviews that painted a picture of utter chaos. Eventually, though, I found a small place that was affordable and, best of all, within walking distance of work. The thought of sidestepping that soul-crushing morning traffic was almost enough to crack a smile. The moment I decided to move, a wave of responsibilities crashed over me. First, I had to gather all my vital documents: birth certificate, social security card, bank statements. Everything had to come with me. I wasn't about to give my parents any leverage over me in the future. I also started discreetly packing my belongings a little at a time. I wanted to avoid a dramatic confrontation, so I worked late at night when the house was quiet and still. During this time, I started dating someone, and having my own place is priceless for us. The apartment was furnished, so I could move in right away. As I meticulously planned my departure, I began to notice details I'd previously overlooked. So much of the furniture in that house was technically mine. Even the microwave was a Black Friday purchase I'd made after ours died. The more I looked around, the more I realized how much I had contributed to that household, and the angrier I became. How could they even contemplate my leaving when I was such an integral part of what held that place together? A few days before my planned move, I overheard another conversation between my mom and Chase. She was on the phone, her voice bubbling with excitement about his imminent return. She kept repeating phrases like, "Don't you worry about a thing, sweetie. We'll figure it all out and we'll make sure you and Harper have everything you need." It was as if she'd already mentally evicted me and was preparing for Chase's grand entrance, even though I hadn't breathed a word of my plans to her. That was the final shove I needed to get out of there. The night I moved out was charged with emotion, although perhaps not in the way one might expect. I waited until midnight to begin loading my car, because I'm dramatic like that. My parents were asleep and I wanted to avoid a scene. I had already signed the lease on my new apartment, and the landlord had handed over the keys, so there was nothing holding me back. Packing up my car felt utterly surreal. I couldn't believe how much stuff I had accumulated over the years. It felt strange to see my life reduced to boxes and bags. Once the last item was loaded, I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, took a deep breath. I expected to feel sadness, perhaps even guilt, but all I felt was relief. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt incredibly liberating. Before I backed out of the driveway, I dashed off a quick text to my mom. "I've moved out. The bills are your responsibility now. Good luck with that." It wasn't the most elegant farewell, but I didn't believe they deserved any more than that. The next morning, my phone exploded with calls and messages from my mom. She left a string of voicemails, each one more panicked than the last. The first was a simple, "What's going on? Did you leave? Call me back." By the third, she was practically screaming, demanding to know where I was and why I hadn't told her I was leaving. I didn't respond. I blocked her, my dad, and Chase on every platform I could think of. I even blocked Harper just to be on the safe side. I knew they would attempt to manipulate me into returning, and I was determined not to let that happen. I turned my focus to settling into my new apartment. It was small, but cozy, and it already felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. I spent the first night unpacking and creating my own space. It was exhilarating, yet slightly overwhelming. Finally, I had a space that was entirely mine. No more tiptoeing around, no more living under the shadow of Chase's accomplishments. The weight of constant comparisons lifted. The very next day, I reached out to a few of my closest friends, sharing the news of my move. Their reactions were so validating. Each one expressed disbelief at how my parents had been treating me. Sarah even offered to help me decorate, which felt incredibly supportive. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone. Just as I began to find my rhythm in this new chapter, my phone rang, and the familiar ringtone sent a shiver down my spine. It was Mrs. Davison, our neighbor from the old house. She said she was just checking in. Apparently, she'd overheard a shouting match between Chase and Harper the previous day. They were already at my parents' place. A strange mix of relief and apprehension washed over me. A part of me whispered, let them sort out their own drama for once. Yet, another part couldn't help but wonder what exactly was unfolding back there. I tried to shake it off, to concentrate on making my new apartment feel like home, but I knew my family wouldn't let me off the hook so easily. A few days later, Aunt Clara called out of the blue. She's technically my mom's cousin, but everyone calls her Aunt Clara. She's the kind of person who knows everyone's business and feels entitled to insert herself, whether invited or not. Honestly, I'd been actively avoiding her since moving out, anticipating her unwavering support for my parents. True to form, the moment I answered, she launched into a tirade. I just got off the phone after a 2-hour call that nearly deafened me, she announced, bypassing any semblance of a greeting. Your mother is devastated, absolutely inconsolable since you left. How could you do this to her? To them? I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Clara, I didn't do anything to them. I simply moved out. They're adults, they can cope. She scoffed dismissively. Moved out? You abandoned them when they needed you the most. Do you even know what's going on over there? I rolled my eyes, but something in her tone gave me pause. What are you talking about? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. A beat of silence hung in the air before she finally dropped the bomb. The house? They're behind on the mortgage. They're on the verge of losing it all. This was entirely new information. What mortgage? I asked, bewildered. They paid off the house years ago. That's what you think, Clara said, clearly relishing the drama. They took out a second mortgage a couple of years ago. Apparently, it was to help Chase and Harper. I can't believe you didn't know. My stomach plummeted. I was speechless, trying to process this revelation. A second mortgage for Chase and Harper? And all this time I had been unwittingly contributing, completely in the dark. Clara droned on, but her words became a blur. Something about me needing to come back and fix things because family sticks together. I hung up on her mid-sentence, probably the rudest thing I've ever done, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I needed answers, and I certainly wasn't going to get them from her. The following day, I went to the bank, needing to confirm the truth of Clara's claims. Part of me desperately hoped she was exaggerating, but alas, she wasn't. The bank teller confirmed that a second mortgage indeed existed on the house. It had been taken out 2 years prior, and the payments were being automatically deducted from the account I'd been faithfully depositing money into each month. All this time, I thought I was merely covering utilities and helping with groceries. It turned out I was also unknowingly footing the bill for a mortgage I never knew existed. The fury that surged through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just the lies, although those stung deeply enough. It was the years of manipulation, of being used as a resource without a second thought, that truly gutted me. I'd scrimped and saved, sacrificing vacations, nights out, even decent clothes so that I could contribute to the household, support them. And all that money? Funneled into rescuing Chase and Harper from their own messes. It validated every insecure feeling I'd ever had about being second to Chase, and in the most painful way imaginable. That night, I went home and simply existed, a body occupying space in my small apartment. My mind was a loop of how could I have been so blind? I kept mentally replaying conversations about money, scrutinizing every nuance, desperately searching for clues I'd missed. Mom's casual comments about finances always being tight, her insistence that everything was fine when I offered to help more, it all clicked into place. She deflected any serious probing to protect their secret, the constant flow of resources to my brother. The magnitude of what they must have given Chase truly hit me. Knowing their financial ineptitude, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd handed him a massive lump sum instead of managing it responsibly. And Chase, bless his heart, probably squandered it with reckless abandon. I wrestled with the urge to confront them, but I honestly wasn't sure I could maintain composure during that conversation. Besides, I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of thinking I'd ride to the rescue. They created this catastrophe, they could find their own way out of it. Yet, the hurt lingered. Playing favorites is one thing, deliberately deceiving your child and using their hard-earned money to cover up your mistakes is a whole other level of betrayal. The subsequent days brought a barrage of calls from other family members. Clara had clearly spread the story, painting me as the villain. My uncle left a sanctimonious voicemail demanding I do the right thing and step up. A cousin texted, accusing me of selfishness, of abandoning my parents on the verge of homelessness with nothing in their pockets. It felt like a coordinated attack, as if they were all reading from the same script. What they failed to grasp was that this wasn't just about the money. It was about a lifetime of feeling insignificant, of consistently being expected to sacrifice for Chase's benefit. And now they wanted me to swoop in and fix everything, absolving them of any responsibility. No. Despite my resolve, Clara's words about the house being in jeopardy continued to echo in my mind. I wanted to let them face the consequences, but the thought of them actually losing the house gnawed at me. Would they come begging, finally acknowledging the gravity of their situation? Would Chase, for once, take some initiative? Or would they simply shift the blame onto me for not intervening? I don't have the answers, but I knew definitively that I would no longer be their safety net. They severed that connection the moment they prioritized Chase's comfort over my trust. Okay, guys, time for an update. Things have definitely progressed since I learned about the second mortgage and made the decision to let my parents and Chase sink or swim on their own. I naively thought I was done, finished with their drama. My family, of course, had other plans. After weeks of stony silence, a letter from the bank landed in my mailbox, the very same bank that had confirmed the existence of the second mortgage. It was a foreclosure notice. Apparently, my parents had been consistently late on their payments for months. The letter was addressed to me because, surprise, I was still listed as the primary contributor on their account. Whether it was a clerical error or a deliberate manipulation tactic, they'd never bothered to remove me from the account after I moved out. I was beyond furious. It wasn't enough that they'd lied, used my money to enable Chase, but they also managed to drag me into the middle of their financial implosion. I immediately called the bank to clarify that I was no longer involved, but apparently because the payments had been coming from my account for so long, I was now technically tied to the mortgage. The bank representative's voice was sickeningly sweet as she explained that foreclosure was imminent if my parents didn't come up with the overdue amount immediately. She actually asked if I wanted to make a payment right then and there. The nerve. My initial reaction was to do absolutely nothing. Let the whole thing crumble. Let them scramble to figure out their living arrangements. But as much as a tiny part of me yearned to watch it all burn, I just couldn't bear the thought of losing that house. It held my childhood, so many memories, and a considerable chunk of my earnings over the years. And honestly, I knew what would happen if they lost it. A guilt trip of epic proportions followed by them camping out on my doorstep expecting me to take them in. Chase would undoubtedly bring Harper along, too. No, that was a level of dysfunction I absolutely refused to sign up for. So, after a lot of agonizing and multiple venting sessions with my friends, I formulated a plan. If I was going to get involved, it had to be on my terms. I wasn't about to simply bail them out without gaining something tangible in return. If they wanted to keep that roof over their heads, the house needed to become mine. The next day, I marched back into the bank, determined to explore my options. It turned out buying the house outright was a possibility, but it hinged on my parents transferring the title to me. In essence, I would become their landlord. The prospect was both intensely satisfying and undeniably unsettling. Yet, I knew deep down that this was the only way to protect myself from future financial ruin. If they were incapable of handling their responsibilities, I would simply take control. Armed with this plan, I found myself back at my parents' house for the first time in what felt like forever. The air was thick with tension. My mother made a beeline for me, attempting a hug, but I sidestepped her and headed straight for the kitchen table where Chase and Harper were seated. Chase was engrossed in his phone, seemingly oblivious to the impending disaster. Harper looked stressed, but she remained silent. My father was off to the side, feigning interest in the newspaper. I wasted no time laying everything out for them. I recounted the foreclosure notice, the mountain of missed payments, and how the bank had contacted me. My mother started to interject with some flimsy excuse about tight finances, but I cut her off. I don't want to hear it, I said, my voice firm. You lied about the mortgage, you used my money without a second thought, and now you expect me to clean up your mess. Here's the deal, I will save this house, but only if you sign it over to me. Period. The room fell silent. My father was the first to break the silence. That's outrageous, he exclaimed. This house is our legacy. You can't just take it from us. Your legacy? I retorted, my anger rising. You jeopardized that legacy the moment you took out that second mortgage to enable Chase's lifestyle. You've done nothing but exploit me, and now you're facing the consequences. Either you sign it over or you lose everything. Chase finally tore his gaze away from his phone, glaring at me with undisguised resentment. You're seriously trying to steal the house? Wow, real classy. You always were jealous. I couldn't help but laugh in his face. Jealous of what, exactly? Your parasitic existence? Please. I'm offering a solution to a problem you helped create. If you don't like it, feel free to pack your bags and find somewhere else to freeload. Harper looked like she wanted to intervene but wisely held her tongue. I couldn't fault her. She was caught in the crossfire of a family implosion not of her making. My mother, predictably, burst into tears, but I remained unmoved. I'd witnessed that charade one too many times to be fooled again. The decision rests with you both, I stated, rising from my chair. Either sign the house over to me or allow the bank to seize it. The outcome is your choice, not mine. I granted them a week to deliberate. Throughout that week, my phone incessantly rang with calls from my mother, each one a plea for me to reconsider. She deployed every emotional weapon in her arsenal, guilt trips, outbursts of anger, subtle manipulations, but I remained resolute. My response was unwavering, each time reiterating, if the house is legally mine, I will ensure its upkeep and maintenance. If not, I refuse to be involved. Finally, they yielded. My father contacted me a few days later, informing me that they were prepared to sign the necessary documents. I suspect the stark reality of potential homelessness had finally sunk in. They were unwilling to relocate, and the prospect of relying on Aunt Clara or anyone else for assistance was even less appealing. Chase was undoubtedly displeased, but his options were limited. Harper, surprisingly, seemed almost relieved. I believe she perceived this as an opportunity to extricate herself from the dysfunctional environment, although she never explicitly verbalized it. Once the paperwork was finalized, the house was officially under my ownership. I clearly stipulated that my parents were welcome to remain, provided they adhered to my established rules. They were expected to contribute their share towards household expenses, and Chase would be required to pay rent if he wished to continue residing there. No exceptions would be made. Predictably, Chase erupted in a fit of anger. He hurled insults at me, accusing me of selfishness and claiming that I was destroying the family. I simply dismissed his outburst. I'd spent far too much of my life attempting to appease them, and I refused to expend any more energy on his incessant whining. As for my parents, they appeared to grudgingly accept the new arrangement, although the atmosphere between us was noticeably strained. My mother rarely spoke to me unless absolutely necessary, and my father maintained a cautious distance. I sensed their resentment towards me for assuming control, but I found that I no longer cared. For the first time, I experienced a sense of empowerment. The aftermath was unpleasant, but I didn't regret my decision. I'd endured years of being taken advantage of, and it was time for me to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The house was now my property, and I was determined to prevent anyone from taking it away from me. I'll provide a final update once I assess how everything unfolds. Final update. Hello everyone. It's been some time since my last update, and quite a bit has transpired. I wanted to provide closure for those who followed the saga. So, here's the current situation. As anticipated, things became quite tense after I officially assumed ownership of the house. Chase was absolutely livid. He resorted to name-calling, accused me of being driven by greed, and even attempted to manipulate our parents into siding with him through guilt. None of his tactics were successful. They understood that the alternative was the complete loss of the house, and I think they finally recognized my resolve not to let them continue to manipulate me. Chase stubbornly refused to pay rent. He declared that it was disrespectful for me to charge him anything and behaved as if contributing financially was beneath him. Consequently, I set a firm deadline: pay up or vacate the premises. He dismissed my threat, assuming I wouldn't follow through. However, the day after his rent was due, I initiated eviction proceedings. He reacted with fury and began packing his belongings, dragging Harper along with him. Harper, however, didn't remain with Chase for long. A few weeks later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that she had left him. She secured a new job, found her own apartment, and appears to be thriving. I can't say I blame her. She was trapped in an untenable situation with him. I commend her for breaking free. As for my parents, they have remained in the house under my established terms. The bills are split now, which is at least something, though a little sting of bitterness still lingers. I think Mom's idea of Chase and Harper being these ever-present fixtures in her life, always nearby, has pretty much crumbled and she's struggling to come to terms with that reality. Dad, I'll give him that, has managed to keep the peace. We're not suddenly best friends or anything, but we're not actively fighting anymore. To be honest, it's much more peaceful around here now. The quiet in the house is almost a relief, and I'm slowly starting to feel like I'm back in the driver's seat of my own life. It's far from a fairy tale, I know. Family dynamics never really are they? But I stand by the choices I've made. And for the first time in what feels like ages, I don't feel like I'm just playing a bit part in someone else's story.